Husband finds love in my sister who he met for the first time after she returned home from her studies abroad, leaving me with no closure. Today, I suddenly get a call from him expressing his deepest regrets and wanting to get back with the family to undo his mistakes, and I couldn't understand why until I get a follow-up call from the lawyers, informing me that his mom's $1 million estate is being left back under my name as an apology from her because of what her son did. Growing up, my childhood was a mess. My dad was a complete mystery. No name, no face, no clue who he was. My mom, on the other hand, was always around but never really there. She spent most of her days drunk, stumbling through life while I tried to keep everything together. My little sister didn't know how bad it really was because I shielded her from most of it. While other kids were out playing or worrying about school dances, I was learning how to cook, pay bills and keep my sister's life as normal as possible. Someone had to. My mom would disappear for days sometimes. When she was home, she was either passed out or screaming at no one in particular. I got used to it, but that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. My sister, though, was my world. I made sure she had clean clothes, help with homework and someone to talk to when things got tough. I didn't have much of a childhood, but I was determined to give her one. When I first met my husband, it felt like I had finally found my place in the world. He wasn't flashy or over-the-top romantic, but he had this steady, comforting presence that made me feel safe. After years of chaos in my life, that stability felt like a dream. He came from a normal, loving family, the kind you only see in movies when you grow up like I did. There were family dinners, holidays filled with laughter and people who genuinely cared about one another. It was so different from what I was used to and it made me want to be a part of it. He saw me in a way that no one else had before. Growing up, I had always been the caretaker, the one who held everything together even when I felt like I was falling apart inside. My childhood wasn't great. Lots of dysfunction, lots of responsibilities for someone so young. By the time I met him, I had built walls around myself so high that I didn't even realize they were there. But with him, I felt like I could finally breathe. And then there was his mom. From the very first time we met, she made me feel like I belonged. She wasn't one of those standoffish or judgmental mothers-in-law you hear horror stories about. No. She was warm and welcoming, the kind of person who instantly made you feel at ease. She had this way of making you believe that no matter what, she was in your corner. It wasn't just about the big gestures, though there were plenty of those too. It was the little things she did that showed how much she cared. I remember one time when I came down with the flu. I felt miserable, but I told everyone I was fine as I always did. She saw right through it. Without being asked, she packed the bag and came to stay with us for a few days. She made soup, brought me tea and even did the laundry because she knew I'd let it pile up otherwise. She didn't make a big deal out of it. She just showed up and took care of things like it was the most natural thing in the world. And when life got overwhelming, which it often did, she was always there to lighten the load. There were times when I was swamped with work, drowning in deadlines and feeling like I couldn't keep up. I'd come home to find that she had dropped by while I was out, leaving a home-cooked meal or tidying up the little messes I didn't have the energy to deal with. It wasn't just the help itself, it was the fact that she noticed what I needed without me having to ask. For someone like me who grew up in a house where love often felt conditional or transactional, this was completely new. She wasn't just helping out because she had to. She genuinely cared, and over time she became more than just my husband's mom. She became the mother I had always wished for but never had. For a while, everything felt perfect. My husband and I built a life together, a life I was proud of. We had a cozy home, shared dreams in a rhythm that just worked. There was a sense of balance I had never experienced before, like I finally had a family I could lean on. Around the same time, my younger sister left to study abroad. I was so proud of her for chasing her dreams. She had always been the smart, ambitious one, and I wanted her to see the world and live the life she deserved. But her being gone left a bit of a gap between us. We still kept in touch, of course, texting, video calling, the occasional care package, but it wasn't the same as having her nearby. The distance made us grow apart in ways I didn't expect. We were both busy, caught up in our own lives. I figured it was just temporary. Once she finished her program and came back, I thought we'd fall back into our old dynamic like no time had passed at all. When she did return, I was over the moon. I invited her to stay with us while she got settled. At first, it was great having her around. She and my husband got along well, and I thought it was nice that they could bond. But then things started to feel off. At first, it was little things. They'd laugh at inside jokes I wasn't part of or have conversations that ended as soon as I walked into the room. I brushed it off because they were family. Why wouldn't they get along? They were family now after all, but then it escalated. They'd spend more time together than seemed normal, always finding excuses to be alone. I tried to ignore that weird feeling in my gut, convincing myself I was imagining things. Until the day I came home early from work and saw them together in a way that left no room for doubt. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My husband and my sister, two of the people I trusted most, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. When I confronted them, my husband stammered through some excuse about how they hadn't meant for it to happen, and my sister just stood there looking guilty but not saying a word. They moved out together a few days later, leaving me alone in a house that now felt like a prison. The divorce was messy, and every meeting with lawyers was like reopening the wound all over again. What hurt almost as much as their betrayal was the silence from my mother-in-law. She had been my rock, but after everything went down, I never heard from her again. I assumed she'd chosen her son's side. Why wouldn't she? He was her child. Still, it felt like I'd lost more than a husband. I'd lost the closest thing I'd ever had to a mom. I spent years putting myself back together. Therapy helped, and I threw myself into my job. I focused on rebuilding my life one tiny step at a time. Slowly, I started to feel whole again, even if the scars were never fully faded. Then, out of nowhere, my ex-husband called. Hearing his voice after all that time sent a wave of anger and disbelief through me. He sounded different, broken, regretful. He said he wanted to fix things and undo his mistakes. I couldn't believe the nerve. Why was he even calling me? I told him I had nothing to say to him and hung up. I thought that was the end of it, but a few hours later another call came. This time it wasn't him. It was a lawyer. The lawyer explained that my ex-mother-in-law had passed away. That news alone hit me like a punch to the gut. She was one of the few people who had treated me with kindness and love. Even when everything else in my life was falling apart, I hadn't spoken to her in years, but I still thought about her often, wondering how she was doing. What the lawyer said next completely floored me. She had left her entire estate to me, not her son. Not divided among relatives, just me, a $1 million. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to wrap my head around it. Why me? The lawyer went on to explain that her reasoning was spelled out in a letter attached to the will. She had been deeply ashamed of her son's actions, the betrayal, the pain he'd caused me, and how he had destroyed not only my life but also the bond I had with her. She couldn't forgive him, and this was her way of making things right. The letter was heartbreaking. She wrote about how much she had admired me and how sorry she was for everything her son had done. She believed I deserved a fresh start and wanted to give me the chance to build the life she felt I'd been robbed of. So, of course, that was the reason why my ex-husband had called me. He found out about the inheritance and the call started immediately. At first, they were all apologies and promises to make things right. And when that didn't work, they turned manipulative. He said his mom would have wanted us to reconcile and that the money could help us rebuild. It was disgusting. Now I'm sitting here trying to figure out what to do next. Should I engage? Block him? Seek legal advice? I feel like I'm at a crossroads, and I have no idea which way to go. Update 1. Hey, Reddit. I wish I could tell you things have gotten better, but honestly, they've just gotten more complicated. Ever since my last post, my ex-husband has been like a bad cold that refuses to go away. It's relentless. The texts, the calls, the voicemails, every single day it's something new. At first, his messages were a weird mix of fake sweetness and guilt-tripping. I want to talk, or I'm really sorry for everything. Let me make it right. But now the mask has slipped. His tone has completely changed, swinging between anger and desperation. One minute he's sending threatening texts about how everything I have now belonged to his mother, as if that somehow justifies him coming after me. The next, he's leaving these prophetic voicemails about how he's a changed man and only wants what's fair. It's emotionally exhausting. He's even started hinting at legal action, saying he won't sit idle if I keep the inheritance. The audacity is unreal. I mean, the money wasn't even his to begin with. His mother specifically left it to me, but that doesn't seem to matter to him. It's like he's convinced himself he's entitled to it. The worst part? I can't shake this nagging feeling that my sister might be involved in all of this. She's been completely silent ever since this whole thing started. Not a single call, text, or email. It's like she's vanished, and honestly it doesn't sit right with me. My gut tells me this might be some kind of joint scheme between her and my ex. I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, who just disappears like that after something so huge? My sister isn't exactly known for facing her problems head-on, but this level of avoidance feels too deliberate. I keep imagining them sitting together plotting their next move. It sounds paranoid, I know, but after everything they've done, is it really that far-fetched? To protect myself, I've started documenting everything. Every single text, voicemail, and email gets saved. Screenshots, recordings, you name it. My lawyer was very clear. If he keeps up this harassment, we might be able to get a restraining order. But honestly, even the thought of having to go to court again makes me sick. I've been through enough legal battles to last a lifetime. The emotional toll is heavier than I expected. Some days I woke up feeling strong, ready to face whatever comes next. But other days, it feels like I'm drowning. Every time my phone buzzes, My heart races. Is it another text? Another voicemail? Another attempt to manipulate me? I've blocked him on most platforms, but he keeps finding ways to contact me. It's not just him either. Mutual friends have started weighing in, and it's like I'm living in the middle of some twisted reality show. Some people think I'm being too harsh, that I should hear him out or find a way to compromise. Others are fully supportive, telling me to stand my ground, but honestly, I don't even care about their opinions. I just want this nightmare to end. What's really eating at me lately is how this whole situation has completely twisted what my mother-in-law intended. That inheritance wasn't supposed to be about drama or fighting. It was her way of showing love and support, of giving me something solid to hold on to after everything fell apart. But now, instead of being a blessing, it's turned into just another thing to fight over. I keep thinking about her decision. She didn't have to leave me anything, let alone the entire estate. She made that choice because she saw the damage her son and my sister caused. She wanted to make things right in the only way she could, and I'll always be grateful for that. But somehow, even with that knowledge, there's this weird guilt I can't seem to shake. It's hard to explain, but a part of me wonders if I'm being unfair by holding on to the money. I know that's ridiculous. It was her decision and I had no part in influencing it. Still, there's this tiny nagging voice in my head that keeps asking, am I wrong for keeping it all to myself? I know the answer logically. My mother-in-law wasn't the type to make decisions lightly. She thought this through and her will was clear. But doubt has a funny way of sneaking in, especially when you've been through what I have. It's like a bad habit. I can't quit questioning myself even when I don't need to. And then there are the rumors. I've been hearing through the grapevine that my ex-husband isn't doing so great. Apparently, he and my sister are in a rough spot financially. They've been hopping from one short-term rental to another because they can't afford a stable place to live. Part of me feels a twinge of pity when I think about it, but it's quickly overshadowed by the memory of what they did. They made their choices. Nobody forced them into the mess they created. It's not my responsibility to clean it up for them, and it never will be. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel a little surreal not that long ago. I was the one struggling to piece my life together while they were living it up, seemingly without a care in the world. Now the tables have turned and they're the ones scrambling. I've been leaning heavily on my friends and therapists for support. My therapist keeps reminding me to focus on what I can control and to set boundaries and stick to them. Easier said than done though. My friends have been amazing, but even they're starting to get tired of hearing about all the drama. I don't blame them. I'm tired of it too. I keep wondering how much longer this is going to go on. Will he ever stop, or will I be dealing with his tantrums for the rest of my life? I'm trying so hard to move forward, to focus on the good things in my life, but he keeps dragging me back into the chaos. Update 2. Something completely unexpected happened last night, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. My sister showed up at my place just like that. No warning. No heads up. She was just standing at my door, and it wasn't like she didn't know what she had done. A few years ago, she'd completely shattered my life. So seeing her again after all this time, it hit me like a ton of bricks. The fact that she managed to track me down was even more surprising. Hardly anyone knows where I live now. After the divorce, I pretty much ghosted everyone. I changed cities, got a new place, and went into full-on leave-me-alone mode. Privacy became my best friend. Turns out though, she'd been on a mission to find me. Later that night, my cousin texted me, apologizing and telling me that he'd caved under her constant pestering. He felt guilty, but apparently, she wore him down. Honestly, I couldn't even be mad. I knew how she was. If she wanted something, there was no stopping her. It didn't matter how much time had passed or how complicated things were. My sister could badger anyone into submission. I'd seen it happen before, so when I saw her standing at my door, my instinct was to shut it down. I wasn't about to let her waltz back into my life and stir up more mess. I was ready for the drama, the manipulation, and all the lies I'd come to expect from her. Before she could even get a word out, I made it crystal clear that if she was there to defend my ex-husband or try to pull some sympathy act for him, she could leave. I was done with all that. I wasn't going to let her come in and play the same old games. But then something strange happened. She didn't get defensive. She didn't try to guilt-trip me or manipulate the situation. Instead, her voice folded a bit and she told me that she wasn't there to defend him. It was a tone I wasn't used to hearing from her. Usually, she was smooth, like she could talk her way out of anything. But this time it was shaky, like she wasn't sure what to say or how to handle the situation, and that caught me completely off guard. What she told me next felt like I was getting a peek behind the scenes of a life I had no idea I was still a part of. Apparently, my ex-husband had been spiraling ever since he found out about the inheritance. It wasn't just the usual manipulation or petty arguments anymore. According to my sister, he'd gone completely off the rails. He was angry all the time, throwing things, having these outbursts that were completely out of character, and he was obsessed with controlling everything. It seemed like the inheritance had consumed him entirely. She said it turned him into a person she didn't even recognize. She told me that during the last months of his mom's illness, he had become more and more aggressive about wanting to understand the will. He kept pushing her to get involved, to help him figure out the legal jargon and to find out how he could get what he thought was rightfully his, but she had deliberately avoided the topic, trying to keep him in the dark. She didn't want him to find out the truth because she was scared of what he might do if he did. It was strange to hear all this. It felt like she was talking about a different person, not the man I had once been married to. But the fear in her voice was real. This wasn't some story she was telling to make herself look good or to manipulate me. She sounded genuinely terrified. For the first time in a long time, my sister didn't seem like the person who had taken everything from me. She seemed vulnerable. She admitted that living with him had become unbearable. The man she had once thought of as perfect, the man who had stolen my life, was now someone she wanted to escape from. His obsession with the inheritance had taken over everything. She said he was unpredictable, always on edge, never calm for more than a few minutes. She had no idea how to handle it anymore and she was scared of what he might do next. Here's the thing. I haven't forgiven her, not even close. The betrayal still feels as fresh as the day I found out about them, but even with all that hurt and anger I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her. Not as my sister but as another human being caught in a toxic situation. I told her she needed to leave, not just the relationship but him entirely. Staying in his orbit wasn't safe for her or anyone else. I didn't offer her a place to stay. That boundary felt necessary. She might have been looking for a lifeline but I wasn't about to let her back into my life fully. What I did give her though was advice. Concrete, actionable advice on how to get out and start over. The whole situation left me feeling more unsettled than ever. I wanted to move forward and to keep putting the pieces of my life back together, but it felt like the past was clawing at me, refusing to let go. Since her visit, I've been on edge. My ex-husband hasn't contacted me in a few days, which should feel like a relief, but instead it's making me paranoid. What's he planning? Is he going to escalate now that my sister seems to be pulling away from him? I've doubled down on documenting everything. Every voicemail, every text, every interaction goes straight into a folder. My lawyer is aware of the new developments, so we're keeping an eye on things in case they escalate further. For now, all I can do is stay vigilant and protect my peace as best I can. Update 3. Alright, Reddit, this is it. The final update to close the wildest, most exhausting chapter of my life. If you've been following along, thank you. If not, buckle up because this last bit ties everything together. It all came to a head when I got a frantic call from my sister. She was sobbing, barely able to get her words out. She told me my ex-husband had shown up at her place and things had gotten completely out of hand. Not just yelling or arguing, she described full-blown chaos. For weeks, my ex's texts and calls had been escalating. What started as a manipulative guilt trips turned into straight-up threats. He'd text things like "this isn't over" or "you think you can take what's mine." At first, I just rolled my eyes at his desperate attempts to scam me, but as the messages got darker and more unhinged, I realized this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control. I hadn't blocked him yet because my lawyer told me to save everything. Every text, every voicemail, every angry email, all of it was evidence. It felt exhausting to constantly document his harassment, but I knew it was important to protect myself in case things got worse. And worse they did. The night my sister called, she told me my ex had shown up at her apartment in a rage. He was banging on the door, yelling loud enough for the neighbors to hear, demanding to be let in. She didn't let him in, thank God, but the scene he caused was terrifying. She told me she'd never seen him like this before, completely unhinged, out of control. It was the moment she realized she couldn't handle him anymore. Hearing her so scared threw me off. I wasn't sure how to feel. On one hand, this was the same sister who had betrayed me so deeply. I wasn't sure I'd ever forgive her. On the other hand, I wouldn't wish this kind of situation on anyone, not even her. The next morning, I decided it was time to deal with this once and for all, but I wasn't going to face him alone. My lawyer friend, let's call him Mark, offered to come with me. Mark's presence wasn't just about legal advice, it was also about safety. Plus, I knew my ex would act differently if there was another man in the room. We set up a meeting at a coffee shop near my sister's apartment. It was a public place chosen deliberately for safety and the watchful eyes of strangers. When my ex showed up, he looked awful. He was unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in days. It was clear he wasn't handling things well, but honestly, I didn't feel sorry for him. The moment he saw Mark sitting beside me, his whole demeanor shifted. I could tell he wasn't expecting me to bring back up and it threw him off balance. I didn't waste time on small talk. I laid everything out. I told him his harassment needed to stop immediately, that his threats were unacceptable, and his actions had consequences. I reminded him that the inheritance wasn't his to claim. It was his mother's decision to leave it to me. and that decision was legally binding. He had no claim to it, no matter how much he wanted to argue otherwise. Mark helped me make it clear that if my ex kept up his behavior, we would pursue legal action. We had more than enough evidence to support restraining orders and I wasn't afraid to use it. The turning point came when I mentioned my sister. I told him she'd left him and wasn't coming back. That hit him hard. He tried to argue, to spin it like she'd wronged him, but it was obvious he was grasping at straws. The anger and frustration on his face was unmistakable, but for the first time in this whole mess, I didn't feel intimidated. I felt free. By the end of the meeting, my ex looked completely defeated. He mumbled something about how unfair it all was and left without another word. It was the last time I saw him. After that, things started to change for me in big ways. The estate was officially transferred to my name, and with that came a sense of finality. I made the decision to sell the house. There were too many painful memories tied to it. It felt like the right time to let go and move on. I also made a choice about the money. While I'm using part of it to secure my future, I knew I didn't want to keep all of it for myself. I donated a significant portion to a local women's shelter in my ex-mother-in-law's name. As for my sister, she's staying with a friend while she figures out her next steps. I've kept my distance. I'm not ready to have her back in my life. Forgiveness is a long road and while I'm not there yet, I've let go of the anger that used to consume me. She made her choices and now she's living with the consequences. My ex is completely out of my life now. I've blocked him on every platform, social media, phone, email. There's no way for him to contact me and I'm finally at peace. Looking back on everything, I've learned so much about myself. I regret not taking these actions weeks ago. This drama could have ended sooner, but there's nothing we can do about it now. This whole experience showed me that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. Betrayal is devastating, but it doesn't have to define you. You can take the pain and turn it into something powerful, a new beginning, a better future. I'm moving to a new city soon, ready for a fresh start. It feels like the right time to leave the past behind and focus on building the life I deserve. To everyone who followed my story and offer support, thank you. Your words of encouragement meant more than you'll ever know. And to my ex-mother-in-law, wherever you are, thank you for believing in me, for seeing my worth and for giving me the chance to rebuild my life.